Hello everybody, my name is Riley. In today's video we're going to be going over the life of Michael Jackson Wrapped. And when I say that, it's just going to be basically like an iceberg sort of thing where I'm starting from the beginning of his career all the way to the ending and things in between, just a lot about his life. I'm going to be doing that in different parts, and for the first part it is going to be his earlier years. So to start off, Michael Jackson was born in 1958. He grew up in Gary, Indiana, ironically on Jackson Street, with 10 siblings, 5 brothers and 4 sisters. So it was very small, only had 2 bedrooms. He had multiple bunk beds with his brothers where they all were in the same room. And keep in mind, like, there's a big age difference. I think the oldest one, Jackie, was like around 18, I believe. I can put an age check, and Michael was also quite young. So I mean, it's a big age gap, sharing a lot of rooms, so I can't imagine how that would have gone. And his father, Joseph Jackson, worked in a steel factory, while his mom, Catherine, worked at Sears, and she was also a devout Jehovah's Witness. And that is something that Michael kept close to his heart even later in his life. I mean, he was a very devout Jehovah's Witness. So even in Thriller, I believe, he put a disclaimer on the video because he didn't want people to think that he believed in like werewolves and things like that. So that's, if you've ever seen a Thriller, that's why there's a disclaimer in the beginning, because Michael was he was just a devout Jehovah's Witness, and it was something spiritually he held on to even later in his life, but just being very spiritual and always manifesting things as well. Also with the Jehovah's Witness, Michael didn't celebrate birthdays or Christmases or anything. They just had like celebrations for like the people, like they'd have example like Joseph Jackson Day.
Celebrate birthdays really, so we create a day for our father and a day for our mother.
But what's not known much about Michael's earlier life, with including his father, is that Joseph himself had a musical past. He was a rhythm guitarist in a band. Nothing much happened of it, but that is kind of where Joseph may have had some sort of music history and known kind of to catch the boy's talent and do something about it. He had a guitar he just left in his closet to build dust, and told his kids never mess with it. But due to Joe always being gone working at a steel factory, he wasn't home a lot, and the boys got curious, and one of the boys specifically being Tito Jackson. So when his father wasn't home, he would go and take the guitar and practice it, listen to the radio and just play songs by ear, try to learn them as best as he could. And for people that don't play guitar, that's very hard to do. One day Tito was practicing and he accidentally broke a string, which is like, that's scary, because Joseph was a very abusive father, and when he was angry, it was scary for the boys. So Tito, just instead of telling his dad, he put it back and acted like nothing happened. Of course Joe found out. He was furious, and when he found out it was Tito, while Tito was crying, he put the guitar to him and was like, show me what you did, like, I guess in a way to see if Tito learned anything. And to his shock, he actually did. Tito showed him that he actually learned a lot of things, and he kind of had a talent for the guitar in a way. And this would be the catalyst to the start of the Jackson 5 band in a way. But that's basically how it was formed, and this leads to part 2, the Jackson 5 era. After this recognition, Joe kind of was like, okay, we're gonna do something about this. So he formed the band. It was originally called the Jackson Brothers, but it was later coined by a neighbor in 1965, Evelyn LaHaye, I believe that's how you say her name, to the Jackson 5. So that's where the name came from, and that's when the band was essentially started. The band originally had Michael as the backup singer and Jermaine on the lead, but Jermaine was the lead vocalist and Michael was just a background vocalist, and his other brothers play the bass and the guitar and things like that. But one day Catherine, Michael's mom, had heard him singing in the bathroom, and she was very astounded by this. She was like, wow, you can really sing. And
Making my bed one day and I was singing, and she said to my father that I could sing.
So she told Joe, she was like, you need to listen to him singing, like, he's very good at singing. Joe's like, no, because Joe was stubborn, and he was like, okay, we have the band, Jermaine is the lead vocalist, we're not changing that. And Catherine's like, please just hear me out. Joe, I mean, he folded, I guess, listened to Michael, and obviously after that Michael was like, okay, Michael was no shade better than Jermaine, so now he would be the lead vocalist, getting Jermaine to do backup. And I think he also played the bass as well, but Jermaine is actually pretty freaking good at the bass. With this whole thing of starting the Jackson 5 would come Michael's shift in his life, and when he started to kind of lose a normal childhood and started to be worked at a very young age, and this would cause a lot of problems with Michael later in life, and he missed out on a lot of stuff as a kid, and he's talked about it multiple times where he just missed out on a lot. It was very sad. He wanted to so badly just go outside and play. He would be in recording studios and things like that.
And some of those times I so passionately wanted to just go over there and just play a little bit and not go to the recording studio and sing.
They would practice all the time. Joe would make them practice over and over again to perfection, and when they weren't right, he would hit them. And
he practiced us with a belt in his hand.
Michael has stated even with ironing cords, his father would hit him. And
ironing cords, whatever's around.
Michael would run away and just threaten his father too. It was just a very stressful dynamic there, and Joe would make them practice after school, before school, on the weekends. Never any time for them to really have a childhood. And I mean, Michael really only had his brothers, and even then he was isolated, and he couldn't like go outside and play with kids anymore because Joe was so adamant on them practicing all the time. Some of Michael's idols at the time, and even later in his life, he's talked about James Brown all the time.
For tonight, because nobody has influenced me more than this man right here.
James Brown was one of his idols. I mean, he took a lot of his feet work as inspiration, and he's recounted with Oprah when they would be recording James Brown dancing, they wouldn't show his feet work, and they wouldn't show his feet work, and Michael would yell at the TV and be like, "Joe, come on."
Unbelievable. And I used to watch him on television, and I used to get angry at the cameraman, because whenever he would really start to dance, they would be on a close-up, and I couldn't see his feet. So I would throw things, I'd be angry. I said, show him.
And I think that's quite nice. I think a lot of people get so caught up in Michael being so famous that they forget that he had idols as well. And not just James Brown, Jackie Wilson, and Charlie Chaplin was someone that he was heavily inspired by and also just admired him. He dressed up as Charlie Chaplin multiple times, and he's talked about how, Charlie Chaplin didn't come from much, and he used a lot of different outlets, and that's someone that Michael was heavily inspired by as well, which I find is unique. It's just nice to see it kind of, I guess for some people maybe brings Michael down to earth more and sees that he had idols as well. I mean, he's a human too. And that basically wraps up the part 2 of kind of how the Jackson 5 was beginning, but this leads to the Motown era, 1969 to 1975, which would be part 3. So this would be where the boys were signed to the Motown record label. In 1968, producer Bobby Taylor discovered the Jackson 5, and then Taylor booked the boys for an opening act, and then later took them to Detroit for an audition at Motown Records. Michael was 10 years old, or he might have been 9 or 10 years old when they were signed to Motown. A tape of their audition was sent to Berry Gordy. I believe he's the co-founder of Motown Records. I mean, they were signed right away. Michael's vocals were just so raw and able to convey so much emotion at a young age. I mean, and even his talent and like his dancing, it was just something very unique for a young kid like him. Immediately was signed, and I believe her name is Suzanne DePass or something like that. She was very adamant. She had talked about the boys to Berry Gordy. Oh my god, his name is so hard to say. Kept asking over and over again, so he was like, okay, obviously these boys got to be great. I mean, they were, and signed immediately. Once they were signed, Michael had to get his age changed, not legally or anything, but just to the public. Motown did make Michael change his age to 9 years old, 2 years younger than his actual age, when they released ABC, I Want You Back. It was a common promotional tactic back then, just to make his talent seem more impressive. It was not necessary at all, but it was just something they did. It's just things in the music industry, they kind of just lie like that sometimes, and it gets deeper than that later in Michael's life, but I'll get to that. And also during his time, ABC and I Want You Back, those songs were huge. Like, to put in perspective, those were like number 1 on the charts, and Michael and his brothers were getting popular pretty fast, not even touching the waters of how far their careers would go. With this, Michael was given a bodyguard, Bill Bray, and Bill Bray would be somebody as a father figure in Michael's life, as Joseph was. I mean, he was more of a manager than a father. They weren't allowed to call him dad.
I said, I'm not daddy, I'm Joseph to you.
I mean, he had an iron fist controlling them all the time, and Bill became somebody that Michael would say on accounts that he was like a father to him, and he could talk to him, and it's a very sweet relationship there. Also, with Bobby Taylor discovering the boys, it becomes a common misconception that Diana Ross is the one who founded the boys or discovered them, but it's not true at all. That was also a tactic that Motown used to kind of get a buzz on their name and just get people to just publicize them, and it was just another lie that people don't know. Diana Ross was not who founded them, and Michael has stated this as well.
Say the lies I had to tell. Diana discovered the Jacksons. That wasn't true. She did not discover us. Great publicity. They pretend. Bobby Taylor.
At 11 years old, Michael's true age, their songs were reaching number 1 on the hit charts, and this was crazy. I mentioned Diana Ross a few minutes ago. This is where they would meet Diana, as she would meet Michael at a very young age through Motown, get close to the boys and build sort of a bond, but nothing crazy yet. But eventually Diana will come back into play. I thought I would mention it now because she will come back later, and it will be more important. But with all this fame, I mean, even when I mentioned earlier, they were reaching a little bit, but once they signed to Motown and ABC and things like that came out, yes, all of Michael and his brothers were reaching fame. It wasn't just Michael, but, you know, Michael was recognized in a different way. I mean, he held the band in a way together. His voice was so powerful. He was kind of I feel like most of the time singers are the ones that are looked at more. And this left Michael at such a young age to miss out on dire parts of growing up, like I said. It led him to be very isolated, very lonely, and he's recounted on this, like I said. It only got worse. His father was still very heavily controlling over their lives. When I say them, I mean all of the brothers and Michael.
Example, it was like, do it like Michael.
But Michael has recounted it was more on him. It was one of the stronger parts of the band, and I mean, he got the discipline very heavily. And
If you miss a step, expect to be,
and that's a thing that affected him a lot. And I mean, I will repeatedly talk about that because for a long time, Joe controlled a lot of what Michael did until it was like in his late 20s. That is basically the Motown era. I mean, that was a huge thing when they were with Motown. I mean, the boys were blowing up. They were huge. But with this, it came the negative parts of the Motown label and the signing to them. Motown controlled a lot of their creative freedom, and it was causing a lot of tension between the band, and they only earned 2.8% of royalties, which is like, that is crazy. That is nothing, especially for the amount of talent all these boys had together. You know, this led them to sign with Epic Records as they gave them more freedom and more control over writing their music, and also 20% of royalties, which is a pretty big jump from 2.8. But this was not that easy, as you see, Jermaine Jackson was married to Berry Gordy's daughter, and he wanted to stay loyal, so he stayed with Motown Records. So this would lead, I believe, Marlon to kind of replace Jermaine in a way, and it was a little odd. Michael and Jermaine threw shade at each other for a while, and
To thank all my brothers who I love very dearly, all including Jermaine. Those were magic moments with all my brothers, including Jermaine.
I mean, I could put the including Jermaine. He stayed loyal to Motown. The band would keep continuing, but with legal factors, they had to change the name from the Jackson 5 to just the Jacksons, as Motown owns that name. The band would still thrive even after Jermaine left, as Joseph would capitalize on Michael and keep the band going anyways. Reaching the years of around 1975, you know, Michael's becoming no longer a kid. He's hitting the teenage years, and this would cause Michael to get early signs of body dysmorphia, and even going further, I think Jermaine stated in a book, he just began to like truly hate himself. It became more than that. I mean, he would wash his face in the dark.
Ever. I would turn off all the lights, and because I had pimples really badly, and it was just difficult, and
His father would tease him as well.
What did your father say?
it was pretty embarrassing. He used to hurt me. I don't think he realized how much he was hurting me.
What sort of thing did he say?
He would tease me about how I looked and say, well, you didn't get it from my side of the family.
How closely he was viewed growing up was honestly gross, and people kind of just didn't see him as a human anymore. I mean, the line between star and human was being blurred. Judgment was overtaken, and the media would just make fun. And it's the thing with growing up as a child star, is people aren't used to that, and they want the person to stay young forever, and that's just not something that can happen. The tabloids and things like that would only get worse as Michael get older. I repeatedly say things get worse because, I mean, Michael would only grow bigger and bigger as a star. That wraps up the Motown to Epic Records era. I believe the boys wrote a lot of albums on Epic Records, and I mean, them switching labels didn't really stop them from writing things. It did kind of build this thing in Michael's heart where he wanted to be separated. This leads us to part 5 of the Wiz era. In 1977, Motown Records bought the rights to The Wiz. It's basically, if you don't know what The Wiz is, it's a remake of Wizard of Oz consisting of an all-black cast. It's originally a Broadway production, but Motown wanted to make it into a film. So, the director, Sidney Lumet, wanted to give The Wiz a sort of orchestral punch, so he called up Quincy Jones, a notable producer at the time. Quincy will be very important. Worked with the likes of Frank Sinatra and a lot of other people, bridge, jazz, and pop. So that's basically a synopsis of who Quincy Jones is. They wanted some famous people at the time, you know, popular artists, to be on this. Conveniently, Michael was cast as the Scarecrow, and Diana Ross would be playing Dorothy. And this is where Diana Ross comes back into play. Keep in mind, Joe was still Michael's manager at this time, and he was still very much in control of what Michael did and everything. He wanted him to stay in that image with his brothers, and he did not want Michael to do The Wiz. To combat this, when I say they, the team of The Wiz, I'm assuming, paid him $100,000 to get Michael on this. That's how badly they wanted Michael on this. They paid Joe $100,000 for this role to get Joe to get away. Like, they're like, shoo, Joe, please let him do this. And, you know, Joe reluctant, and he said yes. This would be the first time in Michael's life where he was away from his family and kind of had his own independence as a young adult. He did live with LaToya as well. I'm not sure how much time they actually spent together, considering Michael would be on set a lot and out at Studio 54. And with that, Michael was 18 years old, but after these shoots, he would go out to Studio 54 and clubs all the time with the actors, and him and Diana Ross specifically would be building a bond during this time, which a lot of people consider this time quite weird and speculate Diana Ross to have groomed Michael, as she met him when he was only, I think, 10 years old, maybe even younger. Michael was known to have an infatuation with Diana. I mean, I can't even recount. I think one time they had showed up on set, and maybe late or something like that. They had found out that Diana had slept over at Michael's apartment, and they were like, did you do anything there? And Michael said, well, you'd have to ask Diana. And I'm not sure what Diana said, but she's said a lot of other things about Michael.
No, what I didn't know is that you were going to get so sexy.
Stating, like, how she found him sexy, even though she had known him when he was 10 and watched him grow up. It was just kind of weird to see that dynamic of him being so young when they first met, and then her kind of teasing him, knowing that he was in love with her. That's where there's a lot of kind of mess between Diana and Michael's relationship. Studio 54, like I said, was a huge thing. That's a place where Michael spent a lot of his time during The Wiz. The most important factor of this time was this would be where Michael meets Quincy Jones, and they would work together to help Michael produce a solo album. And this is huge. Quincy Jones and Michael would work for years and produce many great albums, and that is just the biggest part of this era. Would lead to one of the most iconic parts of Michael's life, the Off the Wall era. The Off the Wall era would be sort of a catalyst for Michael's solo career, but not until after the Victory Tour. And part 6, Off the Wall era, would be 1979 to 1981. It would be the shift of like people seeing Michael as kind of a younger child star to more of a solo pop icon, and I mean older. He was shifting from a child to an adult. Michael was getting very fed up with this. Michael was still tied to his brothers at the time. Joe was still controlling him, still managing him. I mean, he even went on tours with his brothers. I mean, even during Off the Wall, the Jacksons was still very popular, and they were still actively making albums and things like that, and that's why Michael would go on the Triumph tour with them. Michael would soon sever ties with Joe. It's just kind of hard to put in perspective how much control Joe's management had over Michael. I mean, even to his from around 5 years old to being around 22, like being controlled by your own father, like I can't imagine how unfree he felt, stress that would have, just wanting to break free from this image that your father has built for you and just kind of grow. This would be where he hired John Branca as his lawyer and attorney to manage solo career in a way and kind of fire Joe essentially for him. He would cut off Joe, but Joe would still kind of control Michael behind his back, and this would be where there would be the Victory Tour that Joe would set up behind Michael's back and get him to go on it, because I mean he was capitalizing off of Michael's fame, wanted to use a tour for that. This would be more close to the Thriller era, but I'm just explaining it now for context. But after hiring John Branca, he would get him to fire Joe eventually, but this would not stop Joe, as behind Michael's back he would set up the Victory Tour, which is called the Victory Tour because there was a Victory album that had come out around the time of Thriller, I believe. I'm just saying this for context now, so then it will make sense later why Michael was no longer with the Jacksons after this. Michael was very close with his family, and worth it more to him to go on this tour because he cared about his family then. So he would do things that he didn't want to do just because his family. He would go on this Victory Tour. I mean, it looks like in clips, it looks like he's having a great time, and a lot of these songs he's singing are not even from the Victory album. I don't think they sang a single song from the Victory album on the Victory Tour. It was mostly Thriller songs. During the last show of the tour, one of the last nights, Michael would go up, not telling anybody. He would say, "This is the final tour," and that would be the end of it.
It's our last and final tour.
And the end of his no longer making music with them, being a part of it. This would be his final call, be like, okay, I'm finally doing a solo career alone. It's telling his dad basically, like, you cannot control me anymore. His father was completely shocked. Everybody was. You can put a clip. He didn't tell anybody. I mean, he was a pesky guy. After that would basically be the final straw where Michael would finally be able to be alone. And also mentioning John Branca, he will be a key figure later because he's somebody that is quite messy, I would say, and not a guy that is kind of made himself out to be a lot better than he actually is. With Off the Wall, Michael wrote 3 songs. He wrote Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, Working Day and Night, and Get on the Floor, which was just insane. Those were great songs. Quincy Jones also had such an eye for getting very good artists and people together. He was kind of like a movie producer in that way, where he was like, okay, you do this, you get these roles. He was very good at that. And he got a lot of good, or like writers like Rob Temperton, Paul McCartney to help write on the album. Album would be more of a disco album, which is kind of ironic because during this era, disco was kind of at its fall. I mean, people weren't like writing disco albums, but Michael said, whatever, let's do it anyways. It popped off, and it kind of brought disco back in that way. But Off the Wall established him in a way as an independent artist. That was not enough for Michael, and this would also be a catalyst for his first nose job, as during one of his dance rehearsals he would break his nose. That would lead him to getting more nose jobs in the future, but during this time he was leaning towards a different look, and I'll recount on all his looks because that was something very big in Michael's career, was the way that he presented himself. His costumes, I mean, it's huge, it's a big part of Michael Jackson. He had his large afro, is becoming more of a styled puff, and he was establishing his iconic looks during this time. I mean, a lot of sequin things, very fun outfits during this time. This would be to lead us to part 7, the Thriller era of 1982 to 1984. During this time, it had been 3 years since Off the Wall, and Michael wanted more. I mean, yes, Off the Wall did absolutely great, but more. Michael always strived for betterness, and he wanted to be the greatest of all time, as he said multiple times.
Biggest selling album of all time. I wouldn't accept anything unless it was exactly what I wanted.
And he was just very frustrated by the music industry and its racism, and he felt that Off the Wall was very undervalued. He set the goal being the biggest star ever. So during the Off the Wall record, he recorded and voice acted in an E.T. Story album.
Came the roadblock, cars and men.
Which is something that a lot of people don't know, it's quite fun. It's a very whimsical thing of Michael to do. He always liked whimsical things like that. He was very much a Disney kid, and he loved Disney even later in his life. With the making of Thriller, Michael would have written 4 songs out of Billie Jean, which was said to be inspired by obsessive groupies. It tells the story of a woman falsely accusing Michael that her child is his. He wrote Beat It, and the music video had real gang members in it, was said to be extremely tense with chaos, as Michael got real rival gang members to be in the music video, which is just crazy that was able to be a thing that happened. Also wrote Wanna Be Starting Something and
You're a vegetable.
Something and The Girl Is Mine featuring Paul McCartney. It released as a single, which, if you don't know what a single is normally the first song that you release before you establish an album and release that. So we got all these different fans from Paul McCartney and his fans to get together, essentially getting all the fans and a lot of people to want to listen to the album. It was a very good marketing tactic that he used, and that is something that Michael was a genius with music, making it, and also that being his creative process was very interesting. He used his voice to beatbox, and he even hummed melodies to himself. He would make all the harmonies and record them all in one take.
So I'll take that and use that as the main foundation for the track and build all the sounds around that.
I know it's ironic to be like, oh, Michael Jackson was very talented, but genuinely, he had an ear for the music, and to be able to do that is extremely difficult. With the Thriller era, rather than just lip-syncing music videos, he would make high-budget short films. As I said, he wanted to be the greatest, and he wanted to make things new. He wanted to always be doing better than he did before, over and over again. Michael Jackson revolutionized the music industry, changing music videos and being a catalyst for that. He would essentially change this for everybody. I mean, even now you see music videos that are more like a story. That was because of Michael Jackson, and he was the first to really do that. With the Billie Jean music video, he very much wanted to put that on MTV, but Walter Yetnikoff, the president of CBS, called MTV and was like, okay, he threatened to pull down all of their artists and was like, if you don't play Billie Jean right now, I am going to take all these people down. Being scared and threatened, MTV played Billie Jean. And Billie Jean would break a lot of racial barriers that were set at the time, as MTV didn't really play black artists. And Billie Jean was insane, and it was a huge song. It was everywhere. I mean, everybody was listening to it. It was insane. And Thriller was an absolute piece of art, too. Michael strived for new and inventive ideas all the time, and he got John Landis to direct a 14-minute Thriller music video. And it spent 37 weeks on the #1 charts, which is just like, that's insane. And if you haven't seen the Thriller music video, like, what are you doing? And also getting John Landis on that, our movie director at the time, was also crazy. It's genuinely hard to fathom the impact that Thriller had, even now and then. Always an album that Michael was trying to overcome or just like do better than before. I mean, obviously his other albums are great, but this one was so hard for him to beat numbers wise. It just did so well, and even now, I mean, Thriller, the song, is essentially the Halloween's anthem. When you think Halloween, you're like, oh, Thriller, like that's the song. This would also be when Michael would be known as the King of Pop.
Davis Jr. Award recipient, and in my estimation, the true king of pop, rock, and soul, Mr. Michael Jackson.
I believe it was Elizabeth Taylor said that to him in some sort of award thing, and the name really did stick and for the rest of his life even now. And with the release of Billie Jean, this would be where he would have the Motown 25 performance if he did not want to do this at all. But the founder, Berry Gordy, was like, come on, Michael, like, you're going to want to do this. He did play at the Motown 25 performance with the Jackson 5. I guess you would call the Jackson 5 because they're back at Motown, but he played with his brothers again, and he was very energetic. It was a very good performance, even though he didn't really want to do that. And with that, he told Berry Gordy, he was like, I'm not going to do it unless you let me play alone, unless you let me do my own song. It would be where he would play Billie Jean, and it's ironic because Billie Jean is not a Motown song. It's an epic record song. So he would play it there. This would be where he debuted the moonwalk. This basically became the staple of Michael Jackson. This performance was something that would always stick with his image. A lot of people say this is the time where he became star to superstardom, was after this performance. In this performance, he'd rock the iconic sequin glove, the fedora, and the white socks that you're always able to see, because I guess he wore high waters all the time. But no, I'm just kidding. It was iconic. It was a great look. But I do believe that he did wear the glove before the performance. It just only had gotten popular after this. At this time, he rocked the Jerry curl hairstyle. It's a hair treatment that kind of brings a looser, glossier curl, and he wore a lot of shiny outfits, and the military jackets were very popular. This is something that he started wearing then, and it would become something that he wore all the time after this. He was the first solo artist to win 8 Grammys in a single night, and that's where you get the iconic photo of him holding all the things, and that'd also be the night where he said, including Jermaine.
Including Jermaine.
During the end of this era, Michael would have to do a Pepsi commercial because of Joe. Joe told him to do it behind his back, and Michael would do it anyways because he loved his family and he was willing to put them first for himself. During this Pepsi ad shoot, pyrotechnics would catch Michael's hair on fire, causing his entire top of his head to catch in flames. His hair would catch on fire to this and cause him severe burns, immense nerve damage on his scalp, and this would later lead to a reliance on drugs for Michael because he would continuously have nerve damage throughout his life. Pain medications like that are notorious for kind of being extremely addictive, and it's just very unfortunate that this would be kind of the time where that would begin. Many procedures were done on Michael, where they would try to expand his scalp and then bring the new tissue over and things like that, but it would just lead to him having to wear wigs for the rest of his life as he would have horrible nerve damage, and the surgeries really didn't do much after a time. He had lupus and things like that affected his health and ability to heal. But even after that horrible accident, Michael, instead of suing Pepsi or being furious, he used the money from the accident. I believe it's over $7 million or some crazy amount of money. After that, he started a burn center for people that needed it, and he was always big about helping others, and that is something that Michael Jackson did a lot in his life that I don't think a lot of people know, how much money he really donated and how often he helped people. But during that, after the Pepsi era, that would be where Michael did the Victory Tour and then essentially ended his career with his brothers, and that's what I mentioned earlier. Then this would lead us to the Bad Era, Part 8, the years of 1985 to 1989. I believe also during this era, I can check. I think this is where he got Bubbles the monkey. He got Bubbles a little bit before the Bad Era. He just loved animals a lot. And Michael did have a lot of pets. He had a pet giraffe, a pet llama, I think, named Louie. Maybe it wasn't a llama, but I can put a clip of that.
Yeah, hi, Louie. Let them see your beautiful ears. Come on, Louie.
He would get Bubbles the monkey as Michael was very lonely, and animals were something that he could lean to, as animals are non-judgmental and they love you too, and monkeys are very intelligent animals. Eventually he had to give Bubbles away because they get chimpanzees at some point they either attack or they hide and things like that, so that's why he eventually got rid of Bubbles. But live on, Bubbles. The Bad Era would be where Michael took his first ever solo tour and would lean to a more edgier style. He had a longer Jerry curl, and I think he wore half up, half down sometimes. He wore a lot of leather, rocked a lot of belt buckles and metal zippers and things like that. It was a big change in Michael's appearance, but it wouldn't just be that. Michael had a visible change in his skin color and his nose as he had gotten more plastic surgery, as his body dysmorphia would worsen. As when he was a child, like I mentioned, Joe would make fun of him, but what I didn't say is that Joe would call him Big Nose.
What do you say?
God, your nose is big. You didn't get it from me.
What does that do to someone who's going through adolescence?
You want to die.
That would be something that affected Michael's mental health immensely, and he always was trying to perfect his look as he wanted to be perfect, and he didn't view himself ever as truly perfect. Tabloids would go crazy about this in the media. People would talk about his skin color and how it was lighter, and people just weren't really happy about it. I mean, people had a lot of negative things to say. Let that be known, though, the album still did great and really popped off too, but that was something that was very big during this time, as a noticeable change in his appearance. What people didn't know, it was due to Michael's vitiligo that he would only talk about much later in his career.
And this is the situation. I have a skin disorder that destroys the pigmentation of the skin. It's something that I cannot help.
It would affect his life, as he didn't tell people what was truly happening, but that would be why. He'd gone through a lot more rhinoplasties too. His nose was a lot more narrow and it was more upturned. It was a pretty whimsical nose, I would say. A lot like Peter Pan, which is someone that he admired a lot as a kid, and even as he got older, as he just never really wanted to grow up, as he missed out on his childhood. Bad would be the final album that he would work on with Quincy Jones, unfortunately. Michael would write 9 out of the 11 songs on the album: The Way You Make Me Feel, Speed Demon, which featured a claymation music video, which is very cool, and I recommend you watching it, and the dance is iconic. I mean, the dance is really fun. If you've ever played the Michael Jackson Experience, I recommend you playing that one because it's very fun. He also wrote Liberian Girl. Oh my god, that song is so good. And Just Good Friends, Another Part of Me, Dirty Diana. Some believe it's about Diana Ross, which, I mean, I'm not saying it's not. It probably partially is about Diana Ross, also for reasons. Michael would just say it's about groupies and with his brothers and things like that. He also wrote Smooth Criminal and Leave Me Alone, and this would be where The Lean was made. But Bad had a 14-minute short film directed by Martin Scorsese, which is just crazy. And the iconic Smooth Criminal, where The Lean was made. A lot of very iconic and very memorable Michael Jackson things were established during this era. And with The Lean, this was able to happen through special shoes, where parts of the stage would have like these holes, I believe, and then the shoes would click in. He patented that as well, which I think is pretty cool. But this would allow for the look of being able to lean all the way over without them falling over, essentially. Fun fact, in the Smooth Criminal music video, Michael wanted his tie to move a very specific way, so I believe they put like a quarter or a penny in his tie so that it would fall in a certain way. Michael would go on the Bad tour, being the highest grossing solo tour, cementing his place as the king of pop. And this grossed over $125 million. This album did incredibly well, but it led Michael but Michael was still trying to surpass the Thriller album. I mean, everybody, like, to anybody else, if you ask, I mean, they'd be like, well, this album's great, like, why do you feel like you need to do more? That was just something that Michael had always had, even later in life. He was always trying to do better. He was never satisfied with just good. He wanted it to be better, and good wasn't enough. He just struggled to surpass Thriller, and this caused him to be quite depressed. He would become a lot more isolated during this time as well. This would lay the foundation for the Neverland Ranch. And near the end of the Bad era, in August 1985, Michael would buy the ATV Sony music catalog for a whopping $47.5 million, and it included over 4,000 songs with publishing rights, and it included a lot of Beatles songs and a lot of things like that. And this would cause a lot of problems in Michael's life later, as people tried to control him and take this back from him, and a lot of legal battles, a lot of people betraying him. And that goes back to John Branca. John Branca, I believe he worked for Sony behind Michael's back, and it's a very messy situation. I recommend you looking up John Branca and things like that. There will be problems with Sony later in Michael's life, as I will get to that. This gets to part 9, the Dangerous era of 1990 to 1993. The Dangerous era would bring up a new sound, a more urban aesthetics, and a more R&B sound to Michael's album. Dangerous focused a lot more on social problems, as MJ utilized his music a lot to spread a message, and whether that be poverty, racism, etc., that was something that he did not shy away from. A lot of artists, even now and then, were very scared to do things like that because, it can kind of change your image. People might not like it, but that's something that MJ stood for a lot, is problems in the world, and he wasn't afraid to speak up. His physical appearance during this time was also very different. His skin was much more lighter, and due to scalp burns, he wore a lot more different wigs. I mean, I think he wore a lot more like blowout wigs. I mean, they look great, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know, he ate them up, especially during Remember the Time. But it was just very different. People would still be talking about this, and the tabloids always had something to say about his changing appearance, because people just didn't know that it was because of his vitiligo, and it was just something that would continue to affect him. It came out about that. Even then, when he did, people just didn't believe him. Michael would begin to rely on pain medications a lot and sedatives to get by due to the burns from the Pepsi incident. It really is something that impacted his life a lot. It was a huge thing in his life that I don't know if people know how badly that affected him and led him to drugs a lot. Also, in this album, Michael worked with Teddy Riley, pioneering the new Jack Swing, and Teddy Riley would work on a lot of more rap albums and things like that. He was a popular producer at the time, and this would be where, like I said, the switch from Quincy Jones to different producers. It sold a whopping 32 million copies, and Michael co-wrote 9 songs, and that would be Jam, In the Closet, which is so freaky. I could put a clip of Michael singing that live. his voice sounds crazy.
So open the door and you'll see. The one of secrets, make your move, set it free.
She Drives Me Wild, Remember the Time, my favorites. God, that song, Remember the Time, one of my favorites, absolutely great. Can't Let Her Get Away, Black or White, Give It to Me, Keep the Faith, and Dangerous. And he still wrote 3. Who Is It, Will You Be There, and Heal the World. This album has a lot more of like a hip-hop feel to it with songs like Jam. Jam had a lot of diversity to it, and that's a song that I think is very underrated. I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't like the way it's produced. It's very different compared to the rest of Michael's discography, but it is very unique and a very fun song, and I very much recommend you listen to it if you haven't. With Black or White, with a fun guitar riff, and Black or White is also talking about problems socially, and it was a very popular song at the time too. This album did incredibly well. The Black or White music video has estimated 500 million views, and with crazy morphing editing that still stands today. It's just crazy how well that was done, and that's kind of a key to Michael always trying to do better. And one of my personal favorites is Remember the Time, featured Eddie Murphy in the music video as well as Iman as well. He went on a Dangerous tour, although he only performed Remember the Time once live at, I believe, an MTV award thing, and he was sitting down as he broke his ankle, but somehow he still ate it up and the performance was still great. Michael stood strong to helping others and building the Heal the World Foundation at this time as well. And across many countries, he helped people. Calling back to Neverland Ranch, it was a place of personal escape for Michael at the time, and would be later, as it was kind of his sanctuary to do things that he could never do in his childhood, and as it was kind of an escape. I mean, he had a Ferris wheel, a bunch of rides, a private movie theater, and like snow cones and things like that. Crazy, and it was a huge amount of land, like hundreds of acres. It was a place to kind of get away from all his fans, where he didn't have to hide or worry for his safety, although now that I'm thinking about that now, he kind of still did have to worry about his safety in a way, as people would come down on the ranch, like I guess I've heard parachute down. So he still had lots of security on the place, and
hundreds of acres is huge. So if he wanted to go and walk around, which what we would call our garden, then Michael couldn't just walk around on his own, because people would parachute in and say, oh, I've done it by mistake, where am I? In the hope they can bump into Michael Jackson. So he used to walk around, and security used to walk around with him. He had 150 security staff at Neverland.
I mean, there was so many security in his room, and he had secret doorways and things like that. Like, even at his own private sanctuary, he had a lot of security at all times. At the Neverland Ranch, he would let very ill children with life-threatening illnesses stay at the ranch as a place to just have fun, just kind of forget about the illnesses. The Make-A-Wish Foundation would have a lot of kids come there. With this, the tabloids had many foul stories to say, and this would cause the Dangerous album to come to a halt, as he had child abuse allegations. I also forgot to mention, the allegations weren't the only thing that it caused the tour to end. It also was ended because Michael had gone to rehab for his use of pain medications due to his injury, which forever changed his name and his career. And this would be a huge impact on Michael Jackson, as, I mean, most of the time if you hear about Michael Jackson now, or even if you don't like to, the first thing you're going to think of is probably these allegations, because it was something that was so crazy at the time and tainted his career forever. In 1993, 13-year-old Jordan Chandler accused Michael Jackson of sexual abuse, triggering the LAPD and Santa Barbara police to run an investigation. Jackson denied all the claims and had to be dehumanized. As he explains, they strip searched him
on me, which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted.
With this, his legal team advised him that he just pay $20 million with no admission of guilt. But what is not known about this case that leads a lot of people to kind of believe it sometimes is that Jordan Chandler's father had lost custody of him, and his father would be Evan Chandler. He was a dentist that play as a dentist, administer sodium amytal to Jordan, and this was basically, at the time, it was called a truth serum, as people that would take it would say they were abducted by aliens or that they were lizard people. With this, it can also be linked with false memory cases a lot.
Listen to this.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen. And beyond his worst nightmares, sell one more record. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want. They will be destroyed forever.
This would be where Evan asked Jordan about these allegations and eventually got Jordan to admit to these things. And would have a description of Michael Jackson's private. And with the description that Jordan had given, it was completely incorrect. It was not close to Michael Jackson's privates whatsoever. That with this, there was no way for a case formed. So Evan continued to pursue Michael. This would be where Michael paid him $20 million, and this is what a lot of people take as, oh, well, it must have been true he paid him $20 million, but no, it was because Evan kept suing Michael anyways. This would be something that Michael would later regret, because he very easily could have just started a trial and he would have won very easily because there was no evidence whatsoever. It was just something that he listened to his lawyers. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of stress that he would have been under with sort of allegations like this and being the most popular artist of all time. This would lead to part 10, the history era of 1994 to 1997. So after the allegations, Michael took a lot of time to work on legal complications. Also during this time, he married Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis Presley's daughter, obviously. This was quite a messy marriage at the ending, I believe, but it said that they had a genuine bond and they later divorced after 2 years.
I honestly can tell you that it was every sense a normal marriage, and everything was spoken. And in the middle of the night, if he needed to wake up and tell me and bounce something off me and wake me up and want to talk, or if there was trouble, or was he having trouble sleeping then? Yes, he was like a little gnome. I used to tell him he was like a gnome running around the room.
I'm sure Lisa did. She did say that it was quite a normal marriage. I mean, a lot of people believed the press that it was just fake, or it was just a setup thing like that, or a business kind of thing. Genuinely was a real marriage, and it was just due to a lot of disagreements they had and things that she didn't agree with Michael that led them to the divorce. But honestly, their relationship is very sweet from the outside. I don't know about fully in, but I mean, for a while it was quite cute. And if you guys wanted me to do a later video on like Michael's relationships and things like that, I could get on that, because he had a lot of different relationships. I think this is one of the longest ones he had and most serious, other than Debbie Rowe. Also with this relationship, they had quite a silly kiss at those live stream on the Music Awards. That's something that I think people know the relationship for the most. I can put a clip of that, but it is a quite intimate thing that was streamed. And in the years of 1994 and 1995, Michael had a lot of mental and emotional turmoil that he used in his History album in some sorts of a way to kind of write about it. And a lot of these songs are, I would say, emotionally charged, not in a negative way, just kind of to write about the things in the press and get out what he couldn't say into a song. Like History, the Past, Present, and the Future, Book 1, was a double album, the first side consisting of They Don't Care About Us, Stranger in Moscow, Earth Song, DS, Money, Childhood, and Little Susie. And he co-wrote 5 of the songs, this being This Time Around, Tabloid Junkie, Too Bad, History, Scream, and 3 songs that he didn't write. Smile, a cover of the song by Charlie Chaplin, Come Together by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, as, he had bought the Sony ATV music catalog, so he had the rights to these songs. And You Are Not Alone by, you guessed it, R. Kelly! Yeah, I didn't know that. That's crazy. But that sucks, because You Are Not Alone is such an emotional song. And fun fact about this album, during it, Sony would place statues of Michael in cities as advertisements for the album, which is pretty cool. A lot of songs in this album were charged with strong emotions, like the very emotional Earth song, talking about the state of the earth and the lack of care for it, with Jackson's ability to convey such pure despair on the tracks, and anger with Scream, and co-written with his sister Janet. It's the only song, I believe, ever which Michael curses in it, and he says the big F-bomb. So Scream is one of the most expensive music videos of all time, having its place in the Guinness Book of World Records. And with this, They Don't Care About Us regarding injustices of many people and groups, but I mean, there was also some lyrics in this song, I believe, that Michael had to change because people were offended. Michael was able to do a History World Tour, with it being the highest grossing tour of the decade, playing 85 shows in 5 continents. By now, he was unfathomable levels of stardom. And also during this time, Jackson had finally opened up about his vitiligo during an interview with Oprah.
Destroys the pigmentation of the skin is something that I cannot help, okay? But when people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me. So it's a problem for me, okay? I can't control.
This interview has a lot of very personal things that people didn't know about Michael was released during this time. That's why he walked around with umbrellas a lot. The vitiligo, it takes away all the pigment from your skin, causing you to not really have a protection or barrier to your skin, so he had to walk around with an umbrella because you're more easily able to get skin cancer when you do have vitiligo, especially in his severe case like this. But even after he came out about it, that people still did not believe him. And in 1996, he married a longtime friend, Debbie Rowe. And with Debbie Rowe, like I mentioned earlier, they had 2 children, Prince and Paris Jackson. And Debbie says herself that Michael needed to be a father.
She said you needed to be a daddy.
Mm-hmm.
More than she needed to be a mother.
Yeah. And she wanted to do that for me as a present.
She was not very present in the kid's life, but that was kind of a thing she did as a gift to him.
Don't call me mom, because I don't want them to. They're Michael's children. It's not that they're not my children, but I had them because I wanted him to be a father. I believe that there are people who should be parents, and he's one of them.
I don't believe that they were a true romantic relationship in that sense. It was just Debbie Rowe was somebody that cared a lot for Michael, and they had some kids together.
Michael and Debbie's relationship was very short term. Actually, they met over 22 years ago.
Was it intense, Bam? No, it was over time. It was over time. I think it was 18 years, 17, 18 years that I knew him when I had Prince.
And they later divorced, and Michael gained full custody of the kids, as that's what Debbie wanted. And I mean, Michael was a very good father, and it's remarked many times of he just cared for them a lot, and it was very beautiful to watch that.
Because we get to see children's real personality. Here, come here. Prince, over here, before I grind you into hamburger.
Mainly, this was just a time where Michael stayed at Neverland with his family and wrote a lot of, worked on the History album a lot, donated to a lot of charities during this time too. And this will lead us to part 11, getting closer to the end of Michael's career, the Invincible album, which would be 1998 to 2003. And Invincible would be the last studio album of Michael Jackson and the most expensive album, I believe ever, the most expensive album ever made. It costed $30 million. He worked to more futuristic sound and more contemporary pop. I would say it's one of his most timeless albums, as right now, I think it sounds like something that someone would release now, I would say. I believe it's one of his quite undervalued albums, as a lot of very good songs are on that, like The Break of Dawn, You Rock My World. Very, very good album. The album took 4 years to make with over 100 artists, and MJ only wrote 2 out of the 16 songs on this album, being much more of a collaborative album, and a lot of different people wrote on it.
2?
Yeah, I think you could do that. You pretty much do whatever you like.
It would probably be Unbreakable. I'll pick 3. Unbreakable, Speechless, and The Lost Children.
Wrote Speechless and The Lost Children, which he said is one of his favorite songs from this album. Michael was struggling a lot with Sony during this time, as it was a very combative music industry, and there was a lot of dispute regarding his control over songs and mastering, and Michael publicly shamed Tommy Mottola, calling him a devil, and things of that nature, and accusing him of racism and diminishing black artists.
Mottola is a devil because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. And Sony, being the artist that I am, I've generated several $billion for Sony. Several billion. Leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony.
And because of this, all of the promotion for Invincible was halted and stopped, and this led the album to not do as well as that it could have.
I stated this earlier, but near the end of the History era, starting around the 1990s to the early 2000s, Michael had started to use propofol. If you don't know what that is, it's an anesthetic used to make someone be unconscious. It's an anesthetic, like I said, but Michael was using this to combat his severe insomnia during touring when he could no longer get sleep anymore, stated by evidence in court cases later in his life, but also by a manager that he had once, Frank Cascio. But I just thought I would mention this now because this would be a time where Michael had started using this drug in an abusive way that would affect him later in life.
The Sony music beef started because Michael had owned 50% of his music and things like that in this contract, but he was stuck, and he decided to possibly sell this percentage, but not to Sony. And this is when Tommy Mottola would get very furious, in the same time where he would call Tommy Mottola a devil and things like that nature.
Coincidentally,
during this time, this would be where the new allegations would be started, and people would start calling him Wacko Jacko and things of that nature. On a lighter note, before I touch on, he had a fond relationship with Chris Tucker at this time.
Ain't nobody heard from the monkey in a while, Mike. How the monkey doing, man?
He's at Chris Tucker's house.
Chris Tucker got the monkey, man. Right on, man.
And he was featured in the Rock My World music video. And in September 2001, he celebrated his 30th year anniversary as a solo artist, playing with his brothers for Final Time. This is where the only time any Invincible song was played live. It's the only time Rock My World was played live, and it's a very iconic performance. Not just Rock My World, that whole thing. It's just very beautiful. I mean, it was one of the last really live shows Michael did before he passed away. Also during this time, he had his third child, Biggie Jackson, otherwise known as Blanket.
And with his son Blanket, one of the most infamous things that Michael Jackson did was in 2002, in a hotel in Berlin, he dangled his son over the balcony, which most likely, if I had to assume, he was probably on some sort of, because during this time he was very active in his use. But he also claims that it was due to the excitement and the emotions of the fans wanting to see his children, but this is often seen as quite erratic. And
he was doing a lot to protect his family from the press during this time as well, sheltering them, would constantly put scarves over his children's faces and just trying to protect his family. Michael was struggling heavily with his health by now. He was struggling with lupus and severe insomnia, and also heavily relying on using pain medication. This would heavily take a toll on his body. And by 2003, this would be where the allegations started up again, conveniently after Tommy Mottola and all of that beef. The child molestation scandals started again. A lot of this would be started after he did an interview with British journalist Martin Bashir. This interview was edited in a very disgusting way. It was intentionally, initially Martin said that it was to kind of rehabilitate Michael's career and his image, but it backfired. I mean, it was edited in a way to make Michael seem crazy and really odd toward these children. And I mean, due to his close bonds with kids and sometimes Michael's statements, he was easily taken wrongly. I mean, I think it's stated by Macaulay Culkin and things like that. I mean, even if just knowledge, Michael was very isolated and didn't really talk to people that much. I mean, he didn't know he was this extremely popular artist that didn't really have true relationships. He couldn't. He was no longer a normal person anymore. He was this crazy level of stardom. He was untouchable, and he didn't talk to people that much. He was so isolated and didn't have true bonds. It would lead him to not really be able to say what he wanted correctly or in the wrong way.
With Michael is that he's not very good at explaining himself, and he never really has been, because he's not a very social person. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been sheltered and sheltering himself also for the last 30 years, or and so he's not very good at communicating to people, and not very good at conveying what he's actually trying to say to you. And so when he says something like that, people, he doesn't quite understand why people react the way that they do.
Luckily, MJ had his own recording team during this Martin Bashir thing, and it would lead to his own documentary come out of I think it's called The Thing You Were Never Supposed to See, something like that, about Michael Jackson and the parts of Martin Bashir's thing that were taken out of context and parts that were just blatantly removed. And I recommend, if you have any sort of doubt about those allegations, I would recommend watching that, because it really puts to light a lot of the things that weren't shown.
I do want to preface, though, some of the things that Michael did say in Martin Bashir's documentary were quite odd. I mean, if you were to ask any other 40-year-old man if they sleep with kids and they say, yeah, it's fine, it's completely normal, you would be weirded out, and some people view Michael that way too. But you have to put in the perspective of Michael didn't have a normal childhood. He was raised around adults his entire life, and to him, he says that with such confidence and no thinking behind it, because to him, it's normal, it's natural, and no ill intent behind it, because he just wanted to spread love to these kids and give them what he lacked out on. But what he doesn't really think about is how odd that can come off, and I don't want to sit here and pretend that he didn't say some things that were a little bit uncomfortable, because in reality they are, but that's his nature behind it, is what was not a bad thing. He just wanted to spread love, and that's what I'm trying to get across.
Appropriate for a 44-year-old man to share a bedroom with a child who is not related to him at all.
That's a beautiful thing.
That's not a worrying thing?
Why should it be worrying? And I'm on the floor in the sleeping bag.
Did you ever sleep in the bed with them?
No. But I have slept in the bed with many children. I sleep in the bed.
Michael was arrested per allegations from the Arvizo family. For context, Gavin Arvizo, one of the kids from the Arvizo family, was in this documentary with Martin Bashir, and Martin Bashir had told Michael and Gavin to hold hands and things like that, make them look more close in a way. And Gavin was somebody that had come to Neverland Ranch previously. Martin had asked a lot of people that were close with Michael to be in this interview to kind of show humanitarianism in a way, as Gavin had cancer and Michael paid for his treatment and things like that, and after he had healed, they let him go. But what was not said about the Arvizo family is that essentially they were kicked off of Neverland Ranch, as the kids were very hectic. They would break things, steal things from the Neverland Ranch. But it was found that the Arvizos were essentially con artists. They extorted money from many famous people, including George Lopez, Chris Tucker, and others, and stories just weren't consistent from the boys. I mean, Gavin Arvizo repeatedly changed and went back on his statements, saying that Michael had abused them, or he didn't, or certain contexts and things like that. And eventually Michael was acquitted of the charges, but that is just something that people don't know. I mean, the Arvizo family was not trustable. The mother of the Arvizos had lied a lot, sued, I believe, Target, even though she had stolen from Target, and lied about a security guard beating her when in fact it was her husband, as sad as that may be. This would lead to these allegations being started up again, and I mean, it was a highly publicized trial. This would be the first one where Michael would go on trial, instead of how it was last time, where they didn't set up a trial, they just paid money and said nothing. Someone that had been on the other case decided that the case should be reopened, and Neverland Ranch was raided, and a trial was insisted by Michael Jackson this time. But the thing is, there was no real reason for the trial to be needed because there was absolutely no evidence. There was over like 10,000 documents full of evidence, and there was nothing. They found absolutely nothing.
Neverland Ranch, investigators collected hundreds of adult magazines. The prosecution argued that Jackson used these magazines to prepare his victims for sexual activity. One of the magazines returned matching fingerprints to both Gavin and Jackson. But the prosecution overlooked one crucial detail. The defense claimed that Jackson couldn't have looked at the magazine with Gavin because the Arbizos left Neverland Ranch before the magazine was printed. Gavin's fingerprints were on the magazine because he held it during a grand jury proceeding in 2004 before any forensic tests. The county's own investigators had contaminated the only tangible evidence they had.
And Neverland Ranch was stripped up and down. They cut open mattresses. They went through everything in his entire house. Michael even said after this it was no longer a home. It was just a house to him, and he left Neverland Ranch after this.
I also want to include some actual specific events and factual evidence that proves Michael Jackson's innocence. For example, after they had raided Neverland Ranch, searched everything, you can check in the court documents, it's all posted online, but I will include pictures. But Michael had absolutely nothing in his house, absolutely nothing. It's even written that they found nothing in his house. It's left completely blank / nothing because they found no evidence whatsoever. They also searched all of his computers looking for any sort of evidence that pointed him towards these allegations and found nothing on his computer. Wiped through absolutely everything and found not a piece, like a sliver of evidence proving towards that. And he had over 10,000 books in his house. They searched everything, and a lot of the things in his house he had never even opened. May it have been a weird book or something like that. He was gifted many things from fans that have none of his fingerprints on it that he never even opened. And there's a specific book that had one of his fingerprints on it and an inscription in the page. But the thing is, Michael had only flipped through one page and written one thing in it and never looked at the rest of the book, and that's something that people like to glaze over and not really look into that stuff. But those are some specific pieces of evidence that...
But all that to say is that there was truly no evidence that he was guilty of these actions, and the charges were all acquitted. And these things permanently tainted his career, like I said earlier too, but especially the second time around, it was much worse, and this would be something that would never be off of the image of Michael Jackson forever. And during these trials, Michael had repeatedly he was still going through surgeries, and his nose was collapsing, and he had to get it fixed multiple times, and this would be more things like Michael Jackson's nose falling off, or he would have tape on during the trial, and the tabloids just ran crazy, calling him so many crazy things at the time, and so many things about his appearance. And that would be basically the end of the Invincible era and those allegations, leading us to the final years of Michael Jackson, 2004 to 2009. And after many years of stress, Michael Jackson's life, he began to live way more isolated. I mean, essentially, he was probably traumatized after all of this, and he just wanted to get out of it. He moved abroad, while not permanently, just moved out of America, and Neverland was put up for foreclosure in 2005. He was struggling a lot with financial debts, pushing him to get... He was struggling a lot financially. He was in severe debts, not his assets, essentially, but when I say he was in debt, it was the physical money that he had, like, liquidations, I believe. He wasn't willing to sell his assets just yet, so he was essentially broke. His legal team was like, yo, we gotta do something about this. So this would be where the debts would push him eventually to go on a 50-show tour in London.
This is it. This is it. My final show performances in London. This will be it. This is it. And when I say this is it, it really means this is it.
But from the outside, fans were ecstatic to see him again. I mean, this was his final tour, and he said he was going to be playing all of the fans' favorite songs. I mean, it was their final chance to see the star they loved. But behind, Michael Jackson's health was deteriorating. I mean, before the AEG announcements, he was was even late to them. He would be so cold and frail at the rehearsals.
Mentioned that Michael would often wear multiple layers of clothing during rehearsals, even heavy jackets, because he complained constantly about being cold. This, despite rehearsing under hot stage lights in Southern California in June. We now know this was likely a side effect of the propofol and other medications.
You can just in photos just how different he had looked, and he began to rely heavily at this time, extremely much more than before. I mean, he was constantly unable to sleep, and he began to rely on sedatives. He would rely on anesthetics and things like that to fall asleep.
He's lived all this time with doing Demerol and sleeping pills and also pain pills, but the symptoms from propofol, it's like no one knew that he was, well, the public didn't know that he was complaining about his body, one side being an ice cube, another side being very warm. Is that we knew he was doing prescription drugs to sleep and pain. We didn't know about propofol. These are people that were around him. Him not being able to lift to lift himself out of what, 5-pound prop or something, him repeating himself and him losing just unbelievable weight. And these are signs of toxic.
Regardless, though, he kept to the rehearsals and the recordings that are quite bittersweet to watch of the This Is It tour. There's a documentary of all the rehearsals, and even during this time of Michael struggling, he still would put on that performance and try his best. I mean, it was like this switch he had whenever he would go on stage. It was just regardless of what was happening, he was able to get on stage and perform anyways. During this time, also, he had hired Dr. Conrad Murray to get that he had requested. There's a lot of mystery, you could say, around Dr. Conrad Murray, as people believe that he was hired to kind of get rid of Michael Jackson, as Michael Jackson had a lot of power over music that people didn't want him to have in a way.
Jackson's eldest son testified in court before a judge in the negligence case against concert giant AEG today. 16-year-old Prince Jackson told jurors that Michael Jackson was excited at times, but certainly was not happy about the pressure that came with touring. He said Michael sometimes ended phone conversations with promoters in tears, saying at one point, quote, "They're going to kill me." The lawsuit claims AEG negligently hired Conrad Murray, the doctor, convicted of involuntary manslaughter in Jackson's death.
Sony Music, things like that, owning a bit of Sony. Basically, Michael had a lot of power, and some people believe that Dr. Conrad Murray was hired to essentially get rid of him. But Dr. Conrad Murray was hired to administer. Michael was no longer getting any REM sleep, which is just essentially the deep sleep where you're actually getting a rest. And he needed deep sedatives to get any semblance of sleep. Those around him stated his dedication to the show and rehearsal regardless of this. And I recommend watching videos of This Is It tour, like I said. It's just quite daunting to watch the frail Michael still put on so much passion to his craft. And near the end of his life, he was always in chronic pain.
Michael told me, "Corey, I can't tour anymore. I'm not going to tour anymore." Okay? And I said, "Why, Mike?" He said, "Because it'll kill me." That's what he said to me. He said, "It'll kill me." I said, "Well, why would you say something like that?" He said, "Well, he said, remember when I was preparing for my concert, I passed out at the Sony studio?" He said, "Well, it's because when I get ready for a tour, I get dehydrated, I don't eat, I don't drink, I don't sleep. I put so much of myself into preparing for a tour that," he said, "I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just something that I don't even think about anymore. You understand? I've just become so driven that I can't even think about these other things anymore." He said, "They made me walk around with an IV last time." He said,
This leads us to the final even hours of Michael's life, as one night after rehearsal, Michael was unable to sleep like most nights. He asked Conrad Murray to give him some medicine to fall asleep. Conrad Murray had already given him a series of sedatives, and Michael proceeded in asking for more. Clips of him talking that night, and I will warn you, they are a bit grim, but you can hear the state that he was in and how he was not even barely there, and I could put some clips, but I warn you, they are quite daunting to hear.
I didn't have a childhood. I had no childhood. I feel their pain. I feel their hurt. I can deal with it. Heal the world. We are the world. Will you be there? The lost children. These are the songs I've written because I hurt, I hurt.
But Conrad Murray administered propofol, and for those who don't know, this is an anesthetic meant for you to get when you go into surgery, and you're meant to have an anesthesiologist around, another doctor monitoring their heart and things like that. So this is not something you just give out lightly. Conrad administered it anyways and gave it to Michael, and after the fact of already having multiple drugs in his system.
Then at 2 a.m., the muscle relaxant lorazepam. At 3 a.m., the anti-anxiety drug midazolam. By 5 a.m., Murray says Jackson was still not asleep, so he gave him more muscle relaxant and anti-anxiety drug. Finally, at 10:40 in the morning, Murray gave Jackson 25 milligrams of propofol, and Jackson went to sleep. Murray went to the bathroom. When he returned, Jackson wasn't breathing, and that's when he began CPR. But there's a hole in the timeline.
After he had administered the propofol, instead of watching him and making sure that he was okay, even in this sedated state, Murray left the room and had been on a phone call for about 30 minutes.
Cell phone records indicate Murray was talking on his phone for 47 minutes before the 911 call, but he didn't mention those calls to detectives, and we have no idea who he was talking to.
He was not there for a good bit of time, and when he came back into the room, Michael had stopped breathing, and it was said that Murray had done CPR, but on the bed, which, if anybody knows, that is not correct. That is, doing CPR on a bed does not work at all.
Alvarez makes it clear the doctor, who is a cardiologist, is not doing CPR correctly, pumping his chest on the soft surface of Jackson's bed instead of the floor, and he puts Dr. Murray firmly in control of the scene.
The doctor said he don't work it. Okay, so the doctor did that.
And him being a medical professional, he should know that. So that's also a thing that's quite fishy about this. It probably goes a lot deeper than from the surface, and I recommend you do your own research about that and have your own opinion. MJ was rushed to the hospital, and he was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m.
Reporting that Michael Jackson has died.
Afternoon, the Los Angeles Times is reporting that Michael Jackson was pronounced dead.
Conrad Murray was found guilty on the counts of manslaughter, and Michael died of acute propofol and lorazepam intoxication. His death was a global grief. Michael was like no other artist and was the catalyst for so many forms of art, and it truly left an impact on the industry and people's life forever. Even now, I believe people are still grieving that death because he was and forever will be the greatest artist of all time and the king of pop. He left years behind of dedication and love through his music, and that'll be something that we all will be able to go back on and continuously see all the forms of art that he left. And that is the beauty of Michael Jackson's career. And that wraps up the entire video of the life of Michael Jackson Wrapped. And I thank you for staying here this whole time, but I also say that at the end to let you guys know that, I mean, as hard as it is to see somebody this famous on a level like this, he was a human too, and I wanted to make a video like this to kind of give a more inside look to Michael's life and a more human view of him, and just kind of give that touch to his life that a lot of people may not know about, and just give a little bit of a history about his life. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If there's any other videos or things that you would like me to talk about, I'm very down to do that. I mean, I just got this camera, and this is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.